Adana Okeke looked like a vision in white as she walked slowly down the aisle in Enugu State, her smile warm and full of love. The church was filled with family, friends, and well-wishers who had all come to witness what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Her fiancé, Chinedu Ease, stood at the altar in a crisp suit, but there was something unusual in his eyes, a mix of determination and unease. They had been together for 4 years, admired by everyone as the perfect match, and nobody expected anything but joy today. As she reached him, she noticed he wasn't looking directly at her. His hands trembled slightly as he clutched a small folded paper. The ceremony continued until it was time for the vows. Adana spoke hers with heartfelt emotion, making some guests tear up. Then it was Chinedu's turn. At first, his voice was gentle, speaking of love and dreams for their future. But suddenly, his tone hardened. His words took an unexpected turn, and whispers rippled through the crowd. He spoke of a truth Adana had been hiding, something about her past that could destroy lives. Then, looking directly at her, he said, "Before I marry you, they must all know what you did to Namdi." Gasps echoed in the church. Adana's face went pale. She staggered back, her bouquet slipping from her hands before she collapsed to the ground. People rushed to her side, but Chinedu didn't move, only staring at her with cold eyes. As she was carried out, a folded letter fell from her bouquet. Chinedu's cousin picked it up and began to read. The letter revealed a shocking truth. Namdi, Chinedu's childhood friend who disappeared years ago, hadn't died. He had fled the country after a dangerous scam, and Adana had helped him escape to protect Chinedu from those Namdi had wronged. Chinedu realized too late that her silence was love, not betrayal. He rushed to the hospital, but Adana refused to see him. Weeks later, a postcard arrived from Namdi himself, thanking Chinedu for protecting her and warning him that the danger was far from over. Chinedu looked around nervously, feeling eyes on him. The church was filled with soft music and the sweet scent of flowers, but Adana felt something was wrong. As she stood beside Chinedu, she noticed he wouldn't meet her eyes. He kept glancing down at the floor, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. She tried to smile at him, hoping to ease whatever was troubling him, but his lips only twitched slightly before pressing into a thin line. Her heart began to race. This was their wedding day, the day they had planned for months, the day she had dreamed about since he proposed. But there was a heaviness in the air, a strange tension that seemed to press down on both of them. She looked at his hands and saw the faint tremor in his fingers as he clutched a small folded piece of paper. It was his vows. She had imagined him reading them with a smile, his voice warm and full of love. But now, the way he held them, almost like a weapon, sent a shiver through her. The officiant's voice echoed gently through the church, moving the ceremony forward, but Adana's focus was fixed on Chinedu. Every breath he took seemed heavier, slower, as if he was preparing himself for something difficult. She caught him stealing glances at the guests, scanning their faces like he was searching for someone or something. She wondered if he was just nervous, but the unease in his eyes was deeper than simple stage fright. It was the kind of look a person has when they're about to make a choice they can't take back. Her fingers brushed against his, but he quickly pulled his hand away, pretending to adjust his suit. That tiny action felt like a punch to her chest. The joy she had carried all morning began to crumble, replaced with confusion and a quiet fear she couldn't explain. Adana's mind raced with questions she couldn't ask here, in front of everyone. She told herself it was nothing, that love would carry them through. But deep down, she could feel it. Something was about to happen that would change everything. Chinedu cleared his throat, unfolding the small piece of paper with trembling hands. The church grew silent, all eyes on him. He glanced at Adana briefly, then looked down again, his voice low and unsteady as he began. "Adana," he said softly, "from the moment I met you, my life changed. You brought light into my darkest days, and I have always dreamed of this moment." His words were tender, and a few guests smiled, thinking they were hearing the beginning of a perfect vow. He spoke of their first meeting, of the way she had supported him through hardships, of the laughter they shared. Adana felt a small wave of relief. Maybe she had been overthinking his nervousness. But then, mid-sentence, his voice changed. The warmth disappeared. His gaze lifted from the paper, and his tone grew colder. "But," he said slowly, "marriage must be built on truth, and there is truth you have hidden, truth they all deserve to know." The smiles in the crowd faded. People shifted in their seats, sensing something was wrong. Adana's heart began to pound. Chinedu's words cut deeper with each sentence. "You have carried a secret for years, one that could destroy lives if left in the dark. I cannot stand here and pretend I don't know." His eyes locked on hers, sharp and unblinking. She could feel the weight of every stare in the room. He took a breath, his voice louder now. Before I marry you, Adana, they must all know what you did to Namdi. The name hit her like a slap. A murmur rose among the guests, some gasped, others whispered urgently to one another. Adana's fingers tightened around her bouquet. The room seemed to close in, the air thick and heavy. She wanted to speak, to stop him, but her lips wouldn't move. She could feel her legs weakening beneath her. Chinidu's expression didn't change. He looked almost relieved, as if releasing this secret had been his burden to bear. But for Adana, the world had just shifted, and she knew nothing would be the same again. The church was silent, every ear straining to catch Chinidu's next words. His voice was firm now, each syllable cutting through the air. Adana, he began again, you have hidden something for years, something so deep that if it came to light, it could destroy lives. A ripple of shock moved through the guests. Adana's eyes widened, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. Chinidu's gaze stayed fixed on her, his hands gripping the paper tightly. You know what I'm talking about, he continued, his tone sharper. You've carried this secret like a shadow, never speaking of it, not even to me. But today, I will not marry you without the truth being known. The crowd leaned in, their curiosity and unease growing by the second. Then he said it, slowly, deliberately. Before I marry you, they must all know what you did to Namdi. The name hung in the air like a curse. Gasps echoed through the room. Some guests exchanged bewildered glances, others whispered hurriedly. The older relatives stiffened, recognizing the name and the history it carried. Adana's entire body went cold. Her bouquet trembled in her hands. She tried to steady her breathing, but her chest felt tight, as if the walls were closing in. Memories she had buried deep began to surface, each one heavier than the last. The officiant shifted uncomfortably, glancing between the two of them. A child somewhere in the back began to cry, breaking the tense silence for a moment before it returned, heavier than before. Chinidu didn't flinch. His voice was calm, almost too calm, as he looked at her with a mixture of pain and accusation. Tell them, he said quietly, or I will. Adana's throat was dry, her mind spinning. Every pair of eyes in the church was on her now, waiting for her response. But she couldn't move, couldn't speak. The truth she had guarded for years was suddenly standing in the middle of the room, exposed for all to see, and she knew, in that instant, that this wedding would never be the same again. A wave of gasps rolled through the church, the sound sharp and collective, as if the entire room had exhaled in shock. Adana's face drained of all color, her eyes wide, unblinking. For a moment, she swayed, her grip on the bouquet loosening. Then, without a word, her knees buckled, and she crumpled to the floor. The bouquet slipped from her hands, scattering fresh petals across the polished tiles. The sudden fall jolted the crowd into action. A few women screamed, others leapt from their seats. Chairs scraped loudly against the floor as people rushed forward, calling her name. Her maid of honor knelt beside her, gently tapping her cheek, trying to rouse her. Someone shouted for water. Another yelled to call an ambulance. But Chinidu didn't move. He stood frozen at the altar, his eyes locked on her still form. His expression was unreadable, not panic, not relief, something in between. It was as if he were studying her, watching every slow breath she took. The officiant, clearly shaken, stepped down from his place, urging the guests to give her space. Adana's mother pushed through the crowd, tears already streaking her cheeks as she clutched her daughter's hand. Adana, please, she whispered desperately. Two men carefully lifted her, trying to carry her toward the church doors. The air inside felt heavy, as if the tension itself had weight. All around, people whispered about what had just happened, repeating Chinidu's accusation in hushed voices. The name, Namdi, floated through the crowd like a haunting echo. Still, Chinidu remained rooted to the spot, his hands now hanging loosely by his sides. He didn't reach for her. He didn't call her name. His gaze followed her every step as she was carried away, his jaw clenched tight. The petals from her bouquet lay scattered at his feet, some crushed under hurried footsteps. As the church doors swung shut behind her, the sound of the outside world seeped in, sirens wailing faintly in the distance. Yet Chinidu stood motionless, as if the world around him had stopped, his mind somewhere far darker than anyone could imagine. In Chinidu's mind, the present began to blur, and the church faded away. His thoughts pulled him back to 5 years earlier, to a time when Namdi was more than just a friend, he was like a brother. They had grown up together in the same neighborhood, shared secrets, dreams, and struggles. Namdi was the one who always stood by him, through every hardship. But then, one day, he was gone. It happened without warning. Namdi vanished, leaving no note, no goodbye. His family was devastated, searching everywhere, asking anyone who might know something. Weeks turned into months, and no one had answers. Then the whispers began. People in the community claimed that the last person seen with Nambi before his disappearance was Adana. She had been spotted talking to him near the old bus station late at night, just hours before he was never seen again. Chinidu remembered confronting her about it back then. She denied knowing anything about his whereabouts, saying it was just a coincidence. But her eyes had shifted when she spoke, and there was a hesitation in her voice that he had never forgotten. He wanted to believe her, and so he buried his doubts, until today. The rumors had painted Adana in a shadowy light. Some said she and Nambi were secretly involved. Others claimed she knew about something dangerous he had done. A few even whispered about debts, stolen money, and threats from people no one wanted to name. Back then, Chinidu had defended her fiercely, shutting down any gossip. But deep inside, the unanswered questions gnawed at him. Why was she the last to see him? Why had she kept quiet about what they spoke of that night? As the memory faded, Chinidu's jaw tightened. The image of Nambi's smiling face clashed with the vision of Adana collapsing moments ago. In his heart, anger and grief mixed with a desperate need for the truth. That night 5 years ago had left a wound that never healed, and now, in front of everyone, it had been ripped open again. As the men carried Adana toward the church doors, her bouquet dangled loosely from her hand. With each step, petals dropped to the floor, leaving a faint trail behind her. Just as they reached the entrance, something slipped free, a small, folded piece of paper tucked deep within the flowers. It fluttered down unnoticed, landing near the front pew. Chinidu's cousin, Obinna, who had been sitting close by, bent down to pick it up. At first, he thought it was just a misplaced wedding note, but the way it was creased and worn caught his attention. It looked old, as if it had been read many times. The handwriting on the front was unmistakably Adana's. His curiosity got the better of him. Without waiting or asking, he carefully unfolded it. The words inside made his stomach tighten. It wasn't a love note or wedding vow, it was a confession. Her sentences were shaky, the ink smudged in places, as though written in a rush or through tears. She addressed it to Chinidu, but the tone was heavy, urgent, and filled with guilt. Obinna's eyes darted across the page, his heart racing as the truth began to unfold. She wrote about the night Nambi disappeared, explaining details no one had ever heard. It wasn't a random vanishing, and it wasn't what people thought. She admitted she had helped him leave, but not for the reasons everyone assumed. The letter revealed fear, desperation, and a decision she had made to protect someone she loved, a decision that had cost her years of silence. Obinna's hands trembled as he realized the weight of what he was holding. He looked toward Chinidu, still standing motionless at the altar, unaware of the paper's contents. Obinna hesitated, torn between keeping it quiet or showing it immediately. The murmurs in the church grew louder, the air thick with questions. In that moment, Obinna knew this letter could change everything, not just the wedding, but the truth everyone thought they knew. And in his hands, he held the key. Obinna's eyes moved quickly over the words, each sentence pulling him deeper into a truth no one in the church could have imagined. The letter began with a direct confession. Nambi was alive. He had not died mysteriously, nor vanished without reason. The truth was far more dangerous. Adana wrote that Nambi had become entangled in a fraudulent business deal that went horribly wrong. He had taken money from powerful and ruthless people, the kind who didn't forgive debts and didn't leave threats empty. The night he disappeared, he came to Adana desperate, terrified, and begging for help. She described how he told her he had no choice but to flee the country immediately, or he would be killed. He couldn't go to Chinidu because he feared dragging his best friend into the danger. But Adana, thinking of Chinidu's safety, agreed to help Nambi without telling anyone. She arranged a way for him to leave quietly, provided him with some of her own savings, and swore never to speak of it. In the letter, she admitted the weight of this secret had been crushing her for years. She wanted to tell Chinidu, but she knew the moment the truth came out, the same dangerous people might look his way. "I stayed silent," she wrote, "because my silence kept you alive." Obinna's hands trembled as he reached the last lines, where she confessed she had planned to destroy the letter before the wedding but couldn't bring herself to do it. She hoped, somehow, that one day the truth would find its way to him without ruining their love. Closing the paper slowly, Obinna felt the magnitude of what he'd just read. This wasn't betrayal, it was sacrifice. He looked toward Chinidu, still standing frozen, and realized the man was breaking his own heart over a misunderstanding. In Obinna's grip was the proof that could mend it, or shatter it forever, depending on what happened next. Obinna finally stepped forward, his face pale as he handed the letter to Chinidu. The church noise faded in Chinidu's ears as his eyes scanned the shaky handwriting. With every line he read, his breath grew heavier. The anger that had burned in him for years began to crumble, replaced by a sharp, twisting pain in his chest. She hadn't betrayed him. She had been protecting him all along. He saw her sacrifice in every word, the fear she had carried, the loneliness of keeping such a heavy truth locked away. His mind replayed the countless times he had doubted her, the cold moments, the silent questions he never voiced. Now, the answers were here, and they tore at him. The ceremony had dissolved into chaos, but Chinidu's focus was fixed on only one thing: finding her. He left the church without speaking to anyone, the letter still clutched in his hand. The drive to the hospital felt endless, his thoughts filled with the image of her pale face as she collapsed. When he arrived, he rushed to the reception desk, his voice urgent as he asked for her room. The nurse hesitated before shaking her head gently. "She doesn't want to see you," she said softly. The words hit harder than he expected. He tried to explain, to insist that she didn't understand, that he knew the truth now. But the nurse only repeated her words, adding that Adana had requested no visitors except her mother. Chinidu stood in the hallway, his hands tightening around the letter. He could hear faint footsteps and the distant sound of hospital monitors. Behind one of those doors, she was lying there, but he was shut out, just as he had shut her out for years without realizing it. He lingered for hours, hoping she might change her mind, but the door never opened for him. Finally, he walked away slowly, the letter feeling heavier than ever in his pocket, carrying with it the weight of a love he feared he might never get the chance to make right. Weeks passed, but the weight of that day never left Chinidu. The wedding had been abandoned, and he hadn't seen Adana since the hospital. Every night, he replayed her face in his mind, the fear, the hurt, the silence. He thought nothing could surprise him anymore, until one quiet afternoon, an envelope slipped through his front door. It wasn't a letter, but a postcard. The front showed a blurry image of a foreign city skyline. On the back, in hurried, uneven handwriting, was a message that made Chinidu's hands freeze. "Chinidu, thank you for taking care of her all these years, even when you didn't understand. She's stronger than you think, but you must keep her safe. The people I crossed haven't forgotten, and they won't stop. Don't trust anyone. Namdi." The name leapt off the card, pulling him back to every memory of his best friend. His throat tightened. Namdi was alive, somewhere far away, but clearly still in danger, and now Chinidu realized the threat wasn't over. It had only been paused. He flipped the card over again, studying the skyline, wondering if it was a clue or just a distraction. But the last line stayed burned in his mind: "Don't trust anyone." The words felt like they were meant for right now, not just a warning from the past. A sudden noise outside made him glance toward the window. A shadow moved quickly across the street, too fast to identify. His chest tightened as he stepped to the door, opening it slowly. The street looked empty, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was there, watching. He looked down at the postcard again, his fingers gripping it tightly. The world around him seemed quieter than it should be, the kind of quiet that hides danger. Slowly, he turned his head, scanning every corner, every doorway. And then, just for a moment, he thought he saw the same shadow again. His heart pounded. He closed the door, locking it twice, but even inside, the feeling followed him, as if the past had just stepped into his present.